Today we are going to learn about one-point perspective. And a one-point perspective is a trick that artists use to show space and depth on a flat surface. So when artists are trying to make things look like they're far, far away and make things look like they're up close, they will use perspective. And we are going to do something called one-point perspective. So we are going to begin by making a big X on our paper. And before we do that, I want you to make sure that if your paper is portrait or vertical, I want you to turn it and make sure that it is horizontal or landscape mode. And once you've done that, we are going to make our X. So I'm going to go from the corner over here and I'm going to make a line all the way to this corner, and I'm going to do the same here. And I'm going to do it really, really light, and it's okay if it's not perfect. You can see I'm not even using a ruler, and I'm going to go all the way across. So I have one big X, and this is going to get erased. So make sure you draw it nice and light. And now right here in the center, that is what is my 1 point, okay? I was talking about a 1-point perspective. We're going to keep referring to, or I'm going to keep talking about this 1 point that's right in the middle, okay? So now we can begin. So let's pretend that this is a long road and the road has trees, and in the background there's going to be mountains. So we are going to make trees on either side of our road, and they're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And we're going to make sure that we always go back and look at these lines that we've created. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our road. So I'm going to come to that point, that 1 point that I was talking about, and I am going to make a sidewalk on either side. So as I make this line coming down, it's going to get wider and wider and wider, because remember, as things get closer to us, they get bigger. So you can see that this part of the sidewalk is a lot wider than it is here. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to go back to that 1 point, and I am going to make a line following the line that I already have, but it's going to get wider and wider and wider. And this is sidewalks, and this is going to be my road. So to my sidewalk, I'm going to draw a few lines, because a lot of times on the sidewalk, they have these little separations on the concrete. And as they get farther and farther away, they're going to get closer and closer and smaller and smaller. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to make a few lines, and they're bigger because they're closer to us. And as they get farther away, those separations or those areas get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So we have our sidewalk, and now we need to make that yellow dotted line right in the middle so that the cars know which way to go. So I am going to start way back up here at my 1 point, and I'm going to do one little teeny tiny rectangle. And as that rectangle gets closer to me, it's going to get bigger, because remember, as things get closer, they get bigger. So I'm going to do another rectangle, and you can see that it's bigger than the first one I made, and another one. And each time it's getting bigger. And not only is it getting bigger, it's also getting wider at the bottom. And then this one's going to come off the edge of the paper. So you can see how they get smaller and smaller and smaller. So we have our road, we have our sidewalk. Now we're going to line this road with a bunch of trees. And you can make any kind of trees that you like. I'm going to keep it really simple for the sake of this video. So right over here, since this tree is going to be closest to us and it's down low on our paper, we want this tree to be the biggest. So I'm going to start with a big number 11, just like that. And I'm going to close off the bottom of the 11. And now I'm going to make the top of my tree. Now, one thing I like to do is I like to make a big bump and then maybe a few little ones. A big bump and then maybe a few little ones. Now, remember that line that we made? We cannot cross that line. We have to stop right at that line. And that's what's going to make it look like a 1 point perspective. So again, I'm going to make a big curve and then a couple little ones. A big curve and a couple little ones. And my tree is so big, it's coming off the edge of the paper. And that is okay. That's a good thing. Now I'm going to finish it off over here. So there I have my tree. Okay, now I'm going to make another tree, and it could be the same type of tree or it can be a different tree. But again, to keep it simple, I'm going to make it the same type of tree. So I'm going to make a number 11, and you can see it's a little bit higher, okay, because the sidewalk is here. I'm going to close the number 11 at the bottom, and I'm going to make now the bushes. Now I want this tree to look like it's a little bit behind that one. So instead of it coming off the edge of the paper like it did here, it's gonna look like it's going behind this tree, so we overlap. And I'm gonna do the same thing. And remember, I cannot cross this line. So I'm gonna do a big curve and then a couple of little ones, a big one, a couple of little ones, a big one, a couple of little ones, and just like that, okay? I'm gonna do another one here, a number 11, close it at the bottom, and the same thing. Making sure I do not go past that line. And I can keep doing this and doing it, and you're noticing that these trees are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and they're getting higher and higher up the paper, because when you are drawing in perspective, things get smaller as they get farther away, and they get higher up the paper. So I even made one little teeny tiny one. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm gonna do one other little one way back here, 9. You may have more, you may have less, and that's okay. Now to these trees, if I wanted to add a little bit more detail, I can add some branches, maybe especially to this front one, since when things are closer, we can see more of the details. So to the top of my 11, I'm going to make the letter Y. Just like that. And to this one, I'm gonna make the letter Y. A nice big tall Y. And I could keep adding more Ys to make it look like they're branches. See that? And I can do the same thing to this tree. A nice tall letter Y, and another one here, and another one here. And I could keep doing that to all of my trees. But as the trees get farther away, you really don't see as many of the branches because they're far away. Okay, and I can also add just a couple of little curves, just like this, to give it texture. Texture is one of the things we learned about when we did our elements of art. And I'm just making curvy lines. Okay, just a few. And now I'm gonna do the same thing to this side. And over here, you can either make the same kind of tree or a different tree. I'm gonna change it up just a little bit, but again, I'm gonna start with a big number 11, and I'm gonna close it at the bottom. But this time my trees are gonna be a little bit fuller at the bottom and get a little bit pointier. But I'm gonna do the same thing, a big curve and then a couple of small ones, a big curve and then a couple of small ones, big curve, couple of small ones. And again, you can do any kind of tree you want. The only rule is that you can't pass this line, the big X that we made in the beginning. And this one's gonna come off the edge of the paper too. And again, I'm going to not show any branches on this side, but I am going to do some textural lines. Okay, and now we have our next tree. And our next tree, again, the number 11, and it's behind this one. And the same thing. I'm just gonna keep going and adding more trees. So these trees are a little bit different than the trees on the other side. And again, you can do any kind of tree you want. The only rule is not to pass this line, and to make sure that as you keep going, your trees are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, and again, you can add any kind of pattern or lines to make it look like they're nice, bushy trees. So we have our road, we have our trees lining our road. Now we can erase those lines that we made at the beginning. Remember, we said that that was going to be erased. So hopefully you didn't draw them too dark, and I'm just gonna erase them a little bit because when I do color, you won't see them anymore. And now we wanna do something in the very, very background. Now we live in Miami and there are no mountains, but that's okay. It's art, so we can pretend that there are mountains. So I'm just gonna start way up here at the top of my paper and make it look like I have some mountains coming off the edge of my paper. They're so tall. I just love mountains. And they're so big, they really filled up that background. And then I wanna make it look like maybe the sun is setting. So I'm gonna do a nice big sun behind these mountains. And there you have your 1-point perspective. And now I'm just gonna outline it really quick so that you can see it really nice and bright, and add some color, making sure to add value and really make it nice and beautiful.